So, first of all, I'm excited and honored to be able to be here to present what we've been collaborating on with Google. So designers excel at creating rich and engaging designs that delight users. And Adobe XD, free by the way, enables design and team collaboration at the speed of thought, while quickly and easily targeting multiple platforms, form factors, and surfaces, the epitome of ambient computing. This is a perfect fit for Flutter's ability to deliver beautiful experiences across multiple platforms. Now, the problem with that is that translating these designs to code is a huge pain point, especially when you have to do it time after time after time when the design changes. So to help, we have collaborated together with Google to create a plugin for Adobe XD that exports real Flutter code that a developer like you or I could use immediately without having to reinterpret the designer's intent. I'm excited to give you an early look at what this looks like, so let's dive right in. So here I have my Visual Studio Code environment already set up. On the left, I have my iOS simulator running. I already have an app started, and I also am running the Dart Code plugin for Visual Studio Code. I also have Adobe XD running. Now, if you're not at all familiar with Adobe XD, it is a tool for designing at the speed of thought, user experiences for screen design across all sorts of platforms. And I have a small design here, a small snippet from Grant's designs for his application. So what I want to do here is just show you the power of this plugin. This plugin lives inside the plugin panel, and it will be available when we release it through the plugin manager. You can simply do this in application, search, install. You don't even have to restart XD. So let's show you how this works. I'm going to zoom into the badge here. And what I want to do actually is take this badge and transplant it into a more complex design. But let's start simple. So this badge has, it's a really pretty badge. So it has an icon, it has some graphics, it has some text to it. This plugin lets me do two things. I can copy this design and paste it directly as code, which is really cool. But I think even more amazing is it lets me do this as a reusable component. So it generates files automatically for me. So I'm going to select this artboard, and artboards can be used as containers for screens or reusable widgets. And I'm just going to come over here and click Export Selected for Flutter. Now, it's already told me that it's updated a file because I told it ahead of time where this file lives on my disk. Otherwise, you would have a picker. Now, nothing has changed in my sim because I need to go tell Visual Studio Code and Flutter where this lives. So I'm going to come in here. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to just use the badge, save this, and you can see immediately that we have a nearly pixel-perfect representation of what was in XD. And this is real Flutter code. So if you want to come in and inspect this file, you can do just that. And it looks just like you would expect. Super cool, isn't it? Okay, but that's not all. This is to me what is the coolest part of this. So if I come back to XD, and I'm going to drill into this layer a little bit. And I don't know how obvious it is on screen, but there's a few layers in here that have a label that starts with P and a colon. And this means that they're parameterized. So this allows me as the designer to give you a design, but the developer to supply their own data. So I'm going to come back to Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to just overwrite what the designer has given me with some of my own text. So I'm going to say best copy, maybe for the category, and teleporter for the title. And immediately it's updated inside of my simulator. What's even more cool is this separates out my data from my design. So if I, as the designer, decide that, you know what, I want to change this color, I can do that and re-export it. And immediately it's available inside of my simulator. And notice it's kept my data. So this lets me segregate out my data from my design. Really, really cool stuff. Okay, So this is a simple example, but what about something more complex? So thanks to Grant, we have this super complicated screen here. And how is this going to work, right? So I'm going to re-export it, this time to a separate file. I'm going to tell Visual Studio Code to use it. And just like that, we have a pixel-for-pixel representation of what was in XD. And this is real Flutter code, too. But I think there's a little bit of an empty space down here. So I'm going to take this badge and paste it in there. Copy. And I'm going to position it just where I want it. Re-export. And our badge is now in place. Super, super powerful. So I hope you can see that with this small example, how powerful this could actually be. So what we're really excited to announce is that this is going to be available open source. So we invite you to sign up at the waitlist on screen, and we will get you into that, and we're happy to have you play around. We will release to the wider community later this year. Sign up at the link on the screen to join the beta waitlist, and we can't wait to see what you do with this, with the combination of Adobe XD, with Flutter, and the XD to Flutter plugin. Thanks, Tim.
We're going to talk about a couple of tools, and to start off with, one that if you're a designer, you're probably already familiar with, and that's SuperNova. And so I want to invite Jiri Tredzak to talk a little bit about what SuperNova are doing with Flutter. Jiri?
Thanks, Tim. So I'm a developer. In fact, I've been a developer for the last 20 years, and most of that time was spent building beautiful, interactive websites and applications. However, there was always this one thing that I really hated. It was the feeling that designers create something so amazing, only for developers to recreate it from scratch. This, of course, isn't without its problems, as I'm pretty sure you know maybe too well. Details get lost, pixels get forgotten, and it just makes everyone so angry all the time. Worse yet, however, it leads to a very inefficient process, wasting time and resources that could be put somewhere else. So here is my question for all of you. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could automate all the boring and tedious tasks in a process and instead focus on being creative once again? For the past 4 years, we've built a solution that makes this a reality, and I would like to show you how it works right now. So SuperNova works off of design tools that you already like to use, like Sketch or XD. I have a sketch design here, and if I were to create it from scratch, I would probably create the project, then export the assets, export the fonts, code the layout. It's just a lot of work. So instead, I will bring this design to a SuperNova. I will select Flutter, and I will also select the screen that I want to import. And once I do that, everything becomes a Flutter component. So now everything is a Flutter component. Here on the left side, I actually have editor, where I can edit the behavior of the application, while here on the right side, I have a real Flutter application running in real time. But let's do something more amazing. There are two components that I would like to change into actual components. So first is the button. What I can do is I can convert this bunch of layers into actual button, and as if by magic, it actually becomes a button. And even though it looks the same, when I click on it, it behaves like a button. And I can do the same thing with a list of speakers. So instead, I will use a grid list component. And now it becomes a scrollable list. However, it doesn't really look the same because it's scrolling horizontally or vertically, right? So I'll switch to vertical layout because SuperNova exposes all the properties that you have available on all the components. I can also probably change the left inset just so it looks nice. So I think components are now pretty much done. Let's move on to the layout. As you know, every application should be responsive, but fortunately, I don't have to do that because while I was doing the components, SuperNova computed the Flexbox layout for me. And so to show you that, I can just grab the edge and resize the application, and it works just like that. But I think the application is still a bit boring, So let's add some fun to it. I can also trigger animations, and because we have our own animation engine in SuperNova, I can actually make animation on fly. I could create some custom animation, but for this demo, I will select one from the demo library, so just maybe some bounce in, and now when I tap on a button, it actually bounces in, and that's it. I think my application is now pretty much done, but I actually have a few more things to show you. You see, the true power of SuperNova comes from a production code. And so if I click this magical button on the top, it actually generates the production code for me. And it has all the components, the entire layout, and all the assets done. And now, as the last thing, I could export it, and I can either export or I can copy-paste the code. But I actually have support for hot reload here, so I'll enable that. And once I choose the hot reload target, I can switch to Visual Studio, which is already synchronized. And now, when I restart the application and open the simulator, it actually shows the entire application. And if I go back to the SuperNova, I change something, maybe make it a little more dramatic. I go back to Visual Studio and synchronize it. It will actually show the button. And that's it, the entire application in 3 minutes. I think that's pretty amazing. Yeah. And for this reason, I am now very excited to announce that full Flutter support is launching today at supernova.io. And because we think Flutter is the future of cross-platform apps, we are also making it free for all Flutter designers and developers, so you can build great apps together. But before I go, I actually have something amazing to share with you. Ever since the introduction of Flutter for Web, we've been hard at work bringing SuperNova to everyone without any limitation. In the upcoming months, we'll be releasing a completely new SuperNova, rebuilt from the ground up in Flutter. It features advanced support for enterprise teams, as well as code-enabled design system manager that serves both designers and developers equally. Together with Flutter, we will close the gap between design and code. I'm now really excited that SuperNova is joining the Flutter ecosystem, and I cannot wait to see what you create with it. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Tim.
We've been investing a lot in tooling over the last year, and today we have a few new features we'd like to show off. Some of you may already have experience with Flutter, but I know we have some future Flutter developers sitting in the audience today. Before you commit to Flutter, you will want to give it a try. And let's see how we can let you try Flutter without installing anything on your local machine. Let's try a tool called Dartpad. Dartpad was initially created to let you play with Dart. But recently, we launched a brand new version of Dartpad that actually uses Flutter's web support to let you play with Flutter code in your browser. So to access Dartpad, you can go to dartpad.dev. And for those of you who have seen the previous version of Dartpad, you may notice we have redesigned the UI to make it look more modern. Now let's go to the Samples dropdown and select a simple sunflower app, just to show you how it works. Once you do, you'll see the app running immediately in your browser. For example, oh, thank you. As you can see, it's a real running Flutter app, so you can actually interact with it. You can go to the app bar to open the drawer, close the drawer. You can go to the slider to adjust the size of the sunflower. You can also make code changes. Let's say we want to change the color of the sunflower from orange to blue. As soon as Chris makes the change, let's see if Chris can actually find that code. Yes, and you hit the run button, and you can see that change actually gets updated immediately. So Dartpad, in addition to the Dartpad playground, we have also embedded into learning resource. For example, if you go to one of our collabs or documentation, you will actually see Dartpad has now been built into tutorials. So now you can learn. Thank you. I love the energy from this room. Thank you. So now you can learn the real-world Flutter techniques. Use nothing more than a browser. And we hope you find it easy and fun to use. Well, now after trying Flutter and deciding that you wanted to use for production, you would want to install the local tools. So another new feature we're announcing today in preview is called Hot UI. Hot UI lets you see the app's UI being hosted directly in your IDE and make changes there. Let's start by loading up Android Studio. And what you're seeing here is a ticket app already running in the emulator. And now let's open up the Flutter Outline View tab. It's adjusting its resolution for now. But as you click in the UI, notice the corresponding part of the code gets highlighted. And meanwhile, if you click anywhere in the code, the matching UI gets highlighted as well. And moreover, you can actually make changes in the code and your UI will be updated. For example, now Chris is trying to change the color of the ticket app. Once he makes the change, with the existing hot reload feature, you can actually see the color gets updated within less than a second.
Zoe, that green is pretty ugly.
I agree with you, and I actually don't like it either. So let's see if we can do this better. Now this time, we go to the Hot UI preview panel and open up the color picker and change the color right there. Well, Chris is kind of picky, so okay. Do you like this better now?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. As you can see, as soon as Chris makes the change, your UI gets changed, and also the code gets changed as well. So Hot UI lets you directly connect your code to your UI, keeping both of them in sync as you change either. This feature will be available in the Android Studio as a preview for you to try today. And our next step is to integrate it into the Dart DevTools in 2020. So no matter what IDE you choose, and then you can actually use it. Well, I've been doing a lot of talking, so Chris, why don't you come over and tell us about the next two new features?
Great. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you.
OK, so Zoe just mentioned a tool called Dart DevTools. And Dart DevTools is our standalone app for Dart debugging, or Flutter debugging. And so the idea of DevTools is it's separate from any specific editor, so you can choose whatever you like. And today we're proud to announce a brand new preview of DevTools, which you're looking at here. And we're very proud of this because we've actually rebuilt DevTools from the ground up in Flutter itself. So what that has done is given us the ability to implement some fun, cool new features. And so we've actually implemented a new debugging surface here in DevTools using Flutter that enables us to find one of the most common problems that you'll find when you're debugging Flutter apps. And so Zoe, if you could show, there we go. I think we've got here a layout overflow error, which is very common. Any Flutter developer in here has probably seen this already. We've got this, construction zone, police line, do not cross kind of UI that makes it very easy to see that you have an error. But we haven't done a very good job in helping you figure out why you have that error or what to do to fix it. So, Zoe, let's see if we can use this new version of DevTools to fix this problem. So what Zoe's done is she's selected the component. And by the way, it turns out that the default view we had all the information you needed to be able to find this problem. However, you might have trouble seeing it unless perhaps you all live in the matrix. For those of you who live in the real world, we have another feature we call the Layout Explorer. And the idea with the Layout Explorer is it helps you visualize your layout using important properties like width and height and flex and alignment so that you can actually see what's going on in your UI and why it's acting like it's acting. Now, one of the things that the Layout Explorer does is it looks for what might be potential problems and highlights them so that you can find them more easily. And so in this particular case, we see that the width of the child content is much bigger than the width of the parent. And so the Layout Explorer has marked that in red. Now, normally this wouldn't be a problem, but Zoe, I think we might also have a problem with our flex. So if we look at the flex property here, we see it's set to null. And so what happens is because it's set to null, the parent doesn't know what to do with that extra content. And because it doesn't know, that's why you're seeing that error. That is the definition of an overflow error. So normally the way we'd fix this is we'd go into our code and we'd start madly typing and throw in extra code or remove code and see if we could fix it magically and hope that's the right way to do it. Well, the idea with the Layout Explorer is that you can actually interact with these properties live in your tool before you even get to your code. So Zoe, I think this is a flex problem. Let's set the flex parameter and see what we get.
Ta-da.
Oh, good. It looks like our problem has been fixed. And now, when we go back to our code, we have confidence, not only that we know what code to change, but also what caused the problem in the first place. So the idea of Dart Dev Tools is that we are continually adding new debugging services for your real-world problems so that you can fix your apps. And we hope you'll take a look at this new preview version of DevTools and let us know what you think. Okay, great. So Zoe, at this point, we have built our app with Hot UI, and we've debugged it with Dart Dev Tools, and we made it work great on a single platform. But Flutter is multi-platform, right? So we want to make sure that we can support multiple platforms with our single source code. So I'm pleased to announce that as of today, using Visual Studio Code's multi-session debugging, you can actually debug both iOS and Android simultaneously. So you might think, at this point, it would be a reasonable thing for us to do to fire up Visual Studio Code and show you debugging those two devices. And that would be reasonable. But it would also be boring. So when we made two devices work, we thought, how far can we take this? And we went a little crazy. So gentlemen, if you will. I give you the Flutter octopus. Zoe? So what I'm presenting here is the Mac Catalina machine running against 7 simultaneous targets. That includes Pixelbook Go, an iPhone S, an iPad Pro, a Pixel 4 XL, and an ancient Android tablet, as well as both the Windows version, or the Mac version and the web version of this app, all being debugged simultaneously from a single set of source code. And each one of these apps has their own state. So Zoe, if you interact, they're all different apps. However, because they're all being debugged simultaneously, Zoe, let's see what happens when we make a change.
All right.
And because they're all under being debugged, Zoe, go ahead and set a breakpoint. Once we hit a breakpoint, Zoe can trigger that breakpoint from any one of the devices she chooses. And when she's under the debugger, she has access to the watch window and the data tips and all the services of the debugger. And so notice here, let me guess, you use the iPad Pro.
Exactly.
And you can see the call stack here for that particular device. Now, we don't expect you to go and build your own octopus or to debug against all those devices simultaneously, but isn't it nice to know that Flutter supports all those platforms when you need them?
Creating digital experiences with a wide variety of platforms and a plethora of different frameworks. Most of them are great at what they do. They let you build functional apps or functional experiences, but there have been very few that have really gotten my creative juices flowing. The first platform that I really fell in love with was Flash. I know it's kind of a dirty word now, but I loved it. What drew me to Flash was that I could fuse design and code, and I could use it to build both beautiful things, horrible things, but always unique things. It also introduced me to one of the most passionately creative communities that I've ever had the privilege of being a part of. I owe Flash a lot. It really drove my love of design and code, and it let me build the company that I'm still running today. We built a reputation that's let us work with companies like Adobe and Google, Atari, and Disney. But, fast forward 10 years, Flash maybe wasn't quite as viable as it was when I started. But HTML5 was really building up to take its place. And, it was very similar to Flash. If we could imagine something, we could build it in HTML5. And so we were able to seamlessly pivot and take on this new platform. I still really love the web stack, and we still do a ton of work on it. But, it's 10 years later now, and, well, I'm standing here at a Flutter conference, so you might be able to guess where I'm headed with this spiel. But a really good friend of mine approached me a while back, and he really wanted to build an app for a game that we played together called Destiny. And at about the same time, I had a client that introduced me to Flutter. And I kind of poked around a little bit, gotten pretty interested in it. I suggested, hey, why don't we combine these things? Why don't we build a Destiny app using Flutter? And, he said, OK. So we spent the first week or so arguing about state management, because that's how you start any modern dev program. And then he started writing the data layer, and I started building the UI. In a really surprisingly short amount of time, we were able to release an app that we called Redrix for both iOS and Android. And this app made it through app review on its very first try. It's hovered between about a 4.8, 4.9 rating in general. We've logged 0 crashes on the iOS app. And we had a lot of fun building it. And we've had a ton of feedback from the community about how smooth it feels, how pretty it is. And so to me, this is really a testament of what the Flutter team has created. The fact that we've been able to build this with so few issues, being just a couple of people with no experience whatsoever in Flutter or Dart when we started off, and just doing it for fun in our spare time, is really amazing to me. See, to me, a good UI framework makes it easy to realize a design. A great UI framework inspires you to make that design better. And I really feel like I've found that with Flutter. I don't feel like I'm beholden to the framework. I feel like I'm elevated by it. There's a few kind of key points that, for me, stand out in what has made me like Flutter. The first is Dart. I was pretty new to Dart, and I tend to be a little bit cynical of new languages. But it took a lot of the best things from C# and combined with some of the things that I love about JavaScript, and gave me this language that was just really easy to learn and easy to work with. Second thing is that there's a lot of existing building blocks, right? There's tons of first-party and third-party widgets. They're all open source, so I can use them as I want, or I can modify them to make them do what I want them to do. And when they don't do what I need them to do, I have really low-level access to both layout and rendering, so I can do those special weird things that make experiences great. And when that's done, I can wrap that up in a widget and take advantage of the compositional model of Flutter and just inject right back into the normal UI. Makes it really easy to both share and to integrate. And finally, no Flutter talk is finished without a mention of hot reload. As a creative coder, I find hot reload to just be such an exceptional thing. It reduces the barrier of exploration. It makes it so much easier to play. I can iterate, I can refine, I can try things out, I can see how they look. I don't have that 1-minute compile time that just doesn't make it worth it to try and tweak that 0.13 to a 0.14 and see if it looks better. So as I was working on Redrix, I kept going back to my team and kind of sharing the things that I had learned. And I was really excited about how much my team was getting into this. Not just my developers, but even my designers seemed really interested in Flutter as a platform. So when the Flutter team came to us and challenged us to basically show off what you could do with modern Flutter by creating a series of UI vignettes, it was like a total no-brainer for us to say yes. So we did what we do. We jumped in with both feet. We started throwing together ideas. We started exploring the platform, doing research, and sketching out ideas. And this is a tiny sample. We sketched out a lot of ideas. And we specifically made a point of trying to select ideas that we wanted to build, not select ideas that would be easy to build inside of Flutter. And to me, this is important because it's really easy to make demos that are tailored to work on a new platform. It's much harder to find good ideas and then force them to work on that platform. So ultimately, there wasn't a single idea that we weren't able to realize. Like, yeah, we made compromises once in a while, but there was also a lot of cases where our idea got better as we implemented it. And I think, again, that's really exciting. I'm super happy with the end result of what we built, really proud of it, and I'd like to share a little video that we put together about them. Thanks so much. I'm really excited that we finally get to show everyone this. We've had so much fun building these vignettes. They are fully open source, and you can get information about them here and grab the source code. I really encourage you to check them out, play with them, rip out the pieces you like, throw away the parts you don't, and use them to make something really, really cool. In addition to the source code, we're planning on doing some blog posts over the next little while, talking about sort of specific things that we learned or challenges that we faced. And we're also going to take some of the little reusable chunks and repackage them as widgets, add proper documentation. Finally, we are hoping to release, we'll see what Apple does, we're hoping to release both an iOS and Android app that'll let you play around with these vignettes without having to compile the code. If you stick around, later today, I'm going to be doing a talk with one of my designers, and we're going to talk about the process that we use to conceive of, design, and ultimately produce these vignettes.